Good morning, everyone. My name is Anne Marie Riley Girton. I am the author of the upcoming Thunder Maestro with Familius. It is written by me and illustrated by Maria Brzezowska, and I'm here to show you a little bit about our book together. So I'm going to start with the cover. This is the cover of our book. She did a beautiful job illustrating it. It should be out on June 7th, and then I'll give you a little introduction to who I am. So I'm the author of this book, as well as two other Familius books that you see behind me, How the Finch Got His Colors and Why Evergreens Keep Their Leaves. I am the author of 8 other books. I have 6 more forthcoming. Aside from my job as an author, I am a high school teacher. I teach grades 9 through 12 in Methuen, Massachusetts. Maria is my illustrator, and she was born in Poland. She did her studies in visual and media design, and I know that she has quite a few children's books, so we were thrilled to have her illustrate Thunder Maestro. So a little bit about the book. I'll give you the backstory as to why I created it. I love thunderstorms, I always have, and I wasn't one of those children that were afraid of them. So in thinking about things that I love, I wanted to write this book. So I figured, what a great way to show children that thunderstorms aren't always scary if you look at them in a different way. So I thought, how can I make thunderstorms a little less scary for children and a little more entertaining and engaging? And I thought, what a great way to create a character who loves thunderstorms and creates a storm symphony using the sounds of a thunderstorm. So just a little bit about the book. My main character is running out in the yard. She smells the smell of a thunderstorm coming, and she goes to find a stick so she can be a storm conductor. And so as soon as the sounds of the thunderstorm start coming, she uses her little stick as her conductor's wand, and she's pretending to create the clouds coming together and the sounds of the raindrops and the thunder as her music. So it's a beautiful book about imagination and creativity, and I think that children will love it. The other great thing about it, being a teacher, this book is filled with automatopoeia. So it's a great teaching example for teachers that are looking to teach children about automatopoeia and how words make sounds. This is a great book to use for that lesson. In terms of the format and style, it's a picture book, a classic 32-page picture book. The age range, it's going to be perfect for children 3, preschool age, all the way up, even 8 years old, 3rd grade. There's a lot of different things that you can use this book to teach. So visual language, imagery, automatopoeia, using your imagination, things like that. So it's the perfect read aloud for many different things. It is illustrated, has beautiful color illustrations, and included in this, because I used to be a 1st grade and kindergarten teacher for 22 years, I created some teaching materials to go alongside my book. So there's a sheet that the kids can use to go through the book and find examples of onomatopoeia. There's another sheet that they can use where they can go through the book and use their 5 senses and pick up the sights that she's seeing and the smells and the sounds and draw a picture of it and write about it. So there's different activities that the kids can use to go along with this book. And of course, it is fiction. And just to highlight some of the teaching concepts that you can use this for, like I've said, this book is chock full of automatopoeia, which is great. So when I was researching books about automatopoeia, I only found maybe 3 or 4 read aloud. So this is a great little book in that niche that can help teachers. It has beautiful descriptive language. The kids can use that. It's filled with lyrical imagery, visual imagery. Students can use it and teachers can use it for story sequencing. How is the storm building up? What is the story arc? What are the chain of events? Things like that. And then it's just great for visual imagery too. So I know as a 1st grade teacher, I've taught many concepts, automatopoeia being one of them, visual imagery, sequencing. So this is a book that you can use over and over to teach different concepts, which I think is fantastic. This is just a spread from one of the books. So here's an automatopoeia example. Here she is with her baton, and the swish pump is the movement of her arms. And you can kind of see that in the illustrations. I sway with the sound and the movement of the air around me. Rumble, grumble, groan, growl, whoosh, swoosh, creak, squeak, tip, tap. I swirl and twirl. And those words just keep building, and it's a repetitive pattern too, which is great for children because they can pick up on that pattern and kind of repeat it with you. So this is a great read aloud that you can engage children in as you're reading it and the words are building, they can read along with you. That was a perfect example of that. Here's another one of the beautiful, visual language that we have here. I start the symphony off slow and low like a whisper, rumble, grumble, excitement bubbles inside of me. And you can see her in the background as the storm's approaching. She's, creating the symphony in, real time with her little stick. I will say for safety purposes, we put the girl inside once the storm came because we don't want to encourage children to be outside during a thunderstorm. But she continues to use her imagination pretending she's the storm conductor. These are the two resources that I created that will go along with this book, and they'll be available in Edelweiss, I believe. So the first one, they can go on a 5 senses hunt. So the students are given this, and I put the visuals in here for them. So the eyes, they can go back and draw a picture of what the main character is seeing and maybe put a little descriptor in there. What are the sounds that she's hearing? The smelling of the rain, the thunder. I know that's one of my first signs when I was thinking about how I write this. We can always, it's weird, we always say we can smell the storm coming, so they can do that. And then maybe, is there something she could taste, like the raindrops as they're falling, and then touching, like what is it? It's spraying her skin. So they can go back through the story and pick out examples of the 5 senses that she used in the story. And then here on the right is another thing that I created. So I used images. So they're going to go back through this story and find examples of automatopoeia. And I just thought it would be fun to kind of write them in pictures rather than online. So I wanted to make it a little bit more visually interesting for kids as they go back through the story and find different examples of automatopoeia. Just some endorsements that I have from this book. Stephanie Campsey is the author of 5 Sisters and Quacks Like a Duck, and she is my familial sibling. So she loves this book. She purchased it for her own son. And she just talks a little bit about how the visual imagery is beautiful and the abstract art and how it evokes the feelings and melodies and the natural rhythms of the natural world when a thunderstorm happens. My friend Rosie Pova also endorsed this book, talking about, again, just the beautiful illustrations that are in here, the spectacular journey of music, and all the different things that kids could do reenacting this book. The same with my friend Emily, who also endorsed this, and my friend Annetta. So I have different endorsements from different authors who have also read this book and have purchased it before it's come out. So they pre-ordered it. And now I'm going to open it up for any questions that you may have.
So, pardon me. I was curious about, and I actually don't know the answer to this as well. So I actually want to know, how did you come up with the title for this book? How did you make that decision?
So I was thinking about it and I was like, okay, so she's conducting a storm. So she's a storm conductor, but I didn't want storm conductor. That wasn't the thought that I was going for, because it was more about music and thunder. So I racked my brain and I was like, all right, maestro. And I had to ask my Italian friends, because I know that's a root word from there. I said, can maestro mean female and male? Because I don't should I title it Thunder Maestro? And so they told me, no, Thunder Maestro is for both male and female. And I was like, all right, so I'm going to put the word thunder in there because it's about thunderstorms. And I came up with Thunder Maestro. And I just think it's the perfect title. I think it's really neat. I think it's better than the Storm Conductor. So I just rolled with it.
No, it really rolls off the tongue. The only thing is it trips me up a little bit when I'm spelling it, doing it as one word. But yeah, I think it's a beautiful title. I think something really important that you mentioned during your presentation is how this is fictionalized, and how important it is for kids to understand that this is a fictional situation that's teaching kids not to be scared of thunderstorms. So yeah, can you talk to me about a little bit about the process of encouraging kids to, what your thinking was behind encouraging kids to use their imagination, and why it's important for kids not to be scared of storms and to understand the process of a thunderstorm and the magic around it.
So I've worked with children for a long time, and being a teacher, when thunderstorms would roll through, I'd have a lot of kids that were crying and scared of it. And that's like a natural thing for young children to be afraid of. And so when I was thinking about thunderstorms and how scary it is, I thought, how can I create a story for children? Because essentially, a lot of us teachers use stories to help kids overcome fears and to address different childhood situations that they're going through. And I thought, what neat way to take something that is scary for kids and to kind of look at it in a different way, in hopes that maybe the next time a storm rolls around, they're not going to be so fearful of it. They'll think about it as nature's music, and maybe that will inspire them to kind of look at it a little bit differently. So that was my purpose in creating it. I love thunderstorms. I was never afraid of them, but I just, having my own two children and working with kids, that was a big fear for like 90% of my class when they rolled through. So I was like, how can I take something that I love and use that to help children when they're going through something like this? And that's kind of the brainchild for Thunder Maestro.
So do you live in a place where it thunders a lot and there's a lot of storms?
I live in Massachusetts, and we have not as many as I would like, but some of the ones that do roll through are pretty intense. So we had one just last summer that produced hail in a microburst. So that was the most intense one I've seen. No, but when they do roll through, I just remember my students crying and being afraid of it. So I'm hoping putting this out there will change a few kids' minds about they're not that scary, and to kind of look at it differently.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. Who doesn't want to imagine all the dancing and whatnot in the rain?
Mhm.
Um, so what was the process like of creating this book and the illustrations? I know you're no stranger to the publishing world, but what was different about this book from your others in that process?
So for this one, I had to really think about how the story arc was going to unfold, because I was like, okay, so the storm can be approaching. She's going to look at this differently. And then I was like, she's going to be a storm conductor. How great is this? And so when I was creating it, I never thought of the automatopoeia piece until I started putting down, like making my own draft, like what sounds do you hear when thunder's happening, and like what's happening outside with the leaves and the rustling. And so it started to kind of come together for me. And I was like, I need to create this in a way that is using the sounds. And so when I started putting it together, I was like, oh my God, look at all these onomatopoeia words. So then I was like really thinking about the sights and the sounds, and how can I use automatopoeia in all the visuals. So not just what she sees, but what she hears and what she feels and all of that stuff. And I kind of just strung it together. And then it became a pattern. I was like, all right, so I've got the rumble grumble. And I was like, okay, great. And then I was like, all right, so what's going to be next? The groan, growl. And then I was like, I need to keep building it. So it's kind of a repetitive text, kids can pick up on it. And so that, going through that, just making sure that it was building like a crescendo. So everything that was happening. So that was kind of neat. Got it all together. I sent it to my critique partners. We did a couple of tweaks here and there to make it just a little bit more visually interesting. And then I sent it off, and Thunder Maestro honestly was one of the fastest responses I've received from families. I think I sent it and it was like 2 days later, they're like, this is fantastic. So it was great. And then, Maria's illustrations just made it come alive, like way more. You're picturing it in your head, but when you see the spreads completely done, it's just mind blowing. So she did a fantastic job. I couldn't even picture someone else illustrating that the way she did. It's beautiful.
It's so funny that you're telling me it didn't start out as an onomatopoeia book, because it's all that. Like, I thought that was the entire concept behind it. So it's interesting to hear the process of how it came to that. And then I can also imagine this book being fantastic. I can tell you're a teacher, because I can tell it would be a fantastic classroom read, like building up to it and getting to do all the sound effects and whatnot. How old are your kids, and what did they think of this book?
So mine are older. My daughter's 16 and my son is 13, but we're all big storm watchers. And in honesty, those two were the ones that kept encouraging me. My son is like, why haven't you written a book about a thunderstorm yet? Like, you're obsessed with them. Why? Like, we sit out here every day. Why haven't you done? And I said, it's always been in the back of my mind. I just don't know how or what to write about a thunderstorm. And so I really started thinking about what he said to me, and we were watching. He's like, oh, I can smell it. I can smell it coming. And I was like, oh my God. And that was just kind of the spark for me. I'm like, all right, he can smell it. I can smell it. And then we're watching like the leaves turn. He's like, look, the leaves are like turning over like almost upside down, and they're blunt. And so his words just kind of created that for me. And I was like, all right, I think I've got an idea here. And I kind of just went with it.
It always takes a kid's imagination to get you started, really. Talk to me a little bit, and I don't know the answer to this question either, but talk to me about how you got started at Familius and why you chose Familius as a publisher.
So it's funny, How the Finch Got Its Colors was my very first attempt at writing a picture book, believe it or not. And the catalyst for that was I was moved from kindergarten to first grade, and we were doing a unit of study on folktales. And I kept pulling folktales out, and the kids kept saying, we read that last year. We read that last year. And so I couldn't find any new material to make it interesting. And I was like, there's got to be different folktales out there. So I found a few of them. And I had them ready for the next year, but I was like, why? I'm a teacher. I know where there's gaps in the market. Why aren't I doing something about it? So I started flipping through an old book my aunt gave me, and I found like the original How the Finch Got Her Colors. It's literally a paragraph. And so I took it and I was like, I'm writing this. This is the one that I want to do. And so I wrote that book in 3 hours. I'm not kidding. And I sent it off a couple of weeks later, and I sent it to 5 publishers. I looked at Familius because I could see the book, You Should, I forget exactly what the title is, but I was looking at picture books and I saw hers and it was beautiful. And I was like, I'm going to send it here. They look like they're making great children's books. And so they were at the top of my list. And I did get 4 other offers on it, and I turned them all down, and I went with Familius just because talking with Christopher on the phone and his vision for my book and how excited he was, I just felt like it was the right home for that. So that's how my writing career started. It was with that. And so I have 6 books now with Familius, and Thunder Maestro was like the book of my heart. And I just knew I wanted to send it to Familius. I said to my agent, I'm like, I just feel like this is where it needs to go. So can you send it here first? And so we did, and we got a response like 2 days later. So I don't know, I just knew. I knew that's where I wanted it to be.
I had no idea it was such an instant connection. So I'm glad to hear Familius is special.
It
we like to pride ourselves on being. I'm just kidding. But for everybody who is joining us, we're talking about, as you know, Thunder Maestro with Anne Marie. I also have been asking questions for the last 15 minutes, so I want to make sure if anybody else has any questions. If not, I can keep going. Does anybody else have any questions?
I will say, from a teaching perspective, or even from a librarian perspective, this book lends itself beautifully to having children repeat the text with you. So I think it would be a great, even for readers theater, because it has such beautiful language in it, and it builds, and the kids can pick up on the pattern pretty quickly. And I do think that it's multifaceted in that you can use it for teaching onomatopoeia, for visual language. So it's a book that you can use for more than one concept. And that was kind of my goal with this book. I said, how can we make this story helpful to children, but also in a classroom perspective, being a teacher, how can I show teachers how to use this for more than one thing?
Do you have a copy of the book yet?
I don't yet, no.
Okay, I don't either. The title is Thunder Maestro. We don't have a copy yet, unfortunately. If you go back to the our booth, you can check out the there's an arc that is, if you click the cover of the book. Yeah, there's the cover. Do you want to go back to, also, since you're explaining it, do you want to go back to that educational page where you laid out the different concepts?
Sure.
So I can see that as well. Yeah. This is the format and style, and then this teaching concept.
Obviously, this is not all of the teaching concepts. I could go on and on because I'm a teacher and I can find a million ways to use this book. But first and foremost, it's a beautiful book for teaching onomatopoeia. And in researching books with onomatopoeia, I found a handful. Slop Goes Soup, and ones that teachers tend to use over and over. So I found this book fits that niche really beautifully too, because there aren't that many. It has beautiful lyrical descriptive language. Teachers can use this for teaching story arc and sequencing and the building of the concept. Like, so how does she start? What does her imagination take her? What's happening through the story? How does it end, kind of thing. And then again, just books. I know as a teacher, concepts we've taught onomatopoeia, visual language, visual imagery. So again, it's a book that you can kind of pull back out that kids will be familiar with once you read it aloud the first time. And we're going to go back through this book and let's look at it in a different way. Let's look at how the author uses visual imagery, or let's see how this author uses automatopoeia, or let's see how this author uses their 5 senses when they're creating that. So it's a book that I think that you can keep pulling out throughout the year and use that just to teach different concepts, and kids will be familiar with it. But looking at the book in different ways, I think, is a neat way to use a book as well.
Awesome. And so if nobody has any other questions, I'm going to ask my last one, which is, what do you want the biggest takeaway for kids to be when they read your book?
I think the biggest takeaway for me and the heart of creating this book was I want kids to be, or use this book or think back on this book the next time a thunderstorm rolls around, and to not look at it as a scary thing, but to find the beauty in it, and to find that it's nature's music and it's nature's spectacular show for you, putting it on with the the lightning and the sounds of the rain and the thunder, and it to be a little less scary and a little bit more interesting. So not something to be afraid of, something to kind of look at and see how nature provides us beautiful music and a show.
I think the other thing too is teaching kids courageousness and bravery, because it really does encourage kids to face some of their worst fears. So so for everybody, again, if you go back to our booth, you can click the link for the ARC. There are educational materials available. I believe if you click Anne-Marie's face, there will be educational materials available, and they're on Edelweiss as well. And if you need any other resources for this book, reach out to me. I can provide them. Jaiden, Jaiden @familius.com. I can get you anything you need to go along with this book.